How do you like Korea?
Yeah, I mean, I love Korea. I mean, I love being overseas in general. But Korea's pretty amazing. Like, I mean, the food's amazing. The people are awesome. It's definitely, I think it gets a bad rap. Sometimes, like Turkey was the same way. Everybody's like, oh, you're going to Turkey. Like when I went to Turkey, and when you get to these places, you're like, it's amazing, right? Like it's super cool. It's definitely not like it used to be. I came here TDY, like, I don't know, 10 or 11 years ago. And it was wild, back then. But it's definitely calmed down quite a bit, much more like family friendly, I would say. The ability to like go out and immerse yourself in the culture, it's like a 10-minute walk, right? And you're right there. And so, yeah. So it's awesome. I love it. I'm doing 3 years here, so I have to love it. But, it's cool. Like I've always wanted to stay overseas, and I've been able to do that through most of my career. So, being a NAF paralegal manager is pretty amazing all on its own. So, so it was a cool opportunity.
I love that. That's the last job I had with NAF paralegal manager. I really enjoyed it. So you just get to touch all kinds of things and talk to all kinds of people and see what they're going through. And like what you said about Korea is what I like about the DC area is the culture. There's just so much culture here, and not just American culture, but there's a diversity of people here. It's just it's cool, man. I like that.
Yeah.
I was looking at your bio, Sergeant Puma, and I saw that you were overseas. Like maybe you had 2 stateside assignments?
Yeah, so I had Mountain Home, Idaho, but that was like 10 months. That's where I retrained at. I don't know how I worked at, looking back, because you're supposed to do 1 or 2 years before you're allowed to PCS, but I don't know. They looked past that. I don't know. I left from there. Then I did Charleston, which is not a bad place to be stationed in the States. And that was about it. I mean, I did Alaska, but obviously that's not considered U.S. But outside of that, yeah, I've been overseas the rest of my career. So yeah, I love it. Like I'm good. I mean, it's now that I'm getting like closer to retirement, looking back, like it might have been good to be in the States and get a house, right, and like get set up in that regards, because I won't have that, right. But I'm planning on staying overseas, retiring overseas, and living overseas when I'm done too. So.
You overseas guys. I like that Korean, Iraq, and Cuba, and that's it. That's no overseas, no nothing.
It's amazing. I don't know how I managed to be in Kadena for 8 years, but I did consecutive, and it was great. They had to kick me out for sure. But I'm super excited about this conversation and this discussion because it's touching on a hot topic right now that's in the Air Force, and I know it's one of the priorities in the Air Force, one of the priorities in the National Defense Strategy, and definitely something that Chief Wright and the Chief of Staff have definitely kept touching on, and I know that both of you are going to bring a pretty cool perspective to this discussion. So I'm definitely excited about it. I definitely want to share also how this came about because I went to PAID back in November and I met Chief Oliver over there. And I don't know, I was probably griping about something, and, that we needed change and we needed innovation, maybe the checklist or something like that, EROTS, which has been, I don't know, it seems like since I became a paralegal, that has been a main topic. When are we going to get electronic ROTS, right? So I was complaining about something, and Chief Oliver approached me, and he's like, hey, you got to get with Sergeant Puma. Like, you have to talk to Sergeant Puma. He's the innovation guy. Make sure that you get a hold of him. And then he came back around, and I'm not sure it's because I said something else that was crazy, but then he came back around and he was like, oh, and you need to talk to senior peers as well. So this whole thing somewhat, started getting some traction since November, since I went through PAID, and here we are. So this is pretty cool. But let's just do the introductions real quick. We got Senior Master Sergeant Pierce, who is currently the manager up at the Air Force Judiciary, so JAJ, or better known as JAJ. And we have Master Sergeant Puma, who is the 7th Air Force NAF Paralegal Manager, and also the 2019 Yates Popwell PACAF Award winner. I just read that as well, so that is really awesome, and congratulations about that. But if you guys just want to go ahead and say a little bit more about yourselves before we get started.
Awesome. I'll go first since you introduced me first. So, like you said, I'm Stephen Pierce. I don't go by Steve. I go by Stephen. I'm the manager currently at Air Force Judiciary. Did a little bit of time as a paralegal manager, staff superintendent, instructor, which is I think where most people know me from. Doing that, I have four children. 23-year-old, a 19-year-old who's in the Army, a 15-year-old, 14-month-year-old, and I actually have my 6-month-old granddaughter lives with me, and I have one on the way. So you're never too old to keep parenting, I guess. So if you'd asked me, like when we met back in 2009, 2010, this is where my life rewind and turned. I would say you're crazy. So you just never know. Keep an open mind. It's a wild ride. I'm enjoying it, having a fun time, seeing where things take me. I just hit 20 last month, so we'll see what the future holds.
Awesome. Son in the Army, huh?
Son in the Army, but my wife's in the Air Force, so I mean, she's a IMA reserve, Jessica Pierce, and she's attached to AFTW. So I think it almost balances out. I think she outweighs the Army a little bit, but yeah, I could talk about it. Army infantry, no less.
Awesome.
Yep.
That is great. Well, thank you. It's awesome to have you here on this discussion.
Thank you.
All right, so so I guess I'll go. So so I'm Sergeant Puma. I never use my first name ever. Even like growing up, I've never used my first name. So it wasn't really a weird transition going into the military with people calling me by my last name. But yeah, so I've been in the Air Force about 21 years now. And as we talked about earlier, I've been overseas for most of my career, which I've enjoyed doing. I have 2 kids. I have one who is currently enrolled at Clemson, which is pretty cool. Go Tigers! But he's not into football at all, which is really weird because it's like, you think most people pick, the schools based on like, college loyalty or, football loyalty, but not him. Like he could care less about the Clemson Tigers football team. But he's enrolled out there. And then I have another son who just finished 6th grade. But they both traveled with me. One of the unique things, though, about my older son and then my younger son as well to this point, but they actually never went to a school in the United States. And so that was really kind of like a culture shock for him going to the U.S. and having to go to school. And that's just something unique, I think, to like, our lives in the military. But it really didn't dawn on me until he was getting ready to go to college. So that was something that was very unique and very surprising for him to be able to see, definitely with some of the current topics. And obviously we're not going to talk about that stuff today, but it was definitely hard for him initially. But anyway, back to me. So 21 years. Love being overseas. I'm here at OSAN, and I'll be here for 3 years. I love it over here. I'm looking to, hopefully at some point promote, maybe we'll see. Otherwise, I'm looking to retire out of here, move on to bigger and brighter things. I actually have my paralegal studies bachelor's, but I recently changed that to education. So I'm seeking a master's in education because what I'd like to do when I retire is teach English overseas. And so I'm kind of looking towards that. But yeah, that's a little about me.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. No, it's funny that you mentioned that at the end for English overseas, because that's something that I've been I'm trying to look it into as well. The dots teaching gig is pretty nice over there.
So the dots teaching is good, but there's actually these courses. There's these like English as a second language courses. It's like a certification course. It's like, anywhere from like 8 weeks to like a couple years. But once you complete that course, and that's in addition to your like a master's or bachelor's, then you're extremely hireable in all like overseas areas. From I guess Iraq, if you wanted to teach in Iraq, all the way to Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, like anywhere overseas, as long as you have that like specific certification, you're very hireable.
Right.
There's a lot of jobs out there for that, for anybody that's like ever interested in that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've definitely been looking into. And then they have the Troops to Teacher program as
Hmm.
well that can help you if you
They
don't have a
do.
certification.
What's funny though is like I've emailed them like throughout my career maybe 5 or 6 times. I've gotten zero response from them. So
Oh no.
I don't have much faith in the Troops to Teachers, but but I think it's a good program, and had I pushed it, I'm sure I could have got somebody to contact me. It's always those like whims, like you're thinking about it, and so you're like, oh, you know what, I forget. Yeah, let me email them again, and then you don't get a response, but you forget about it because you're doing other stuff. So
That's right. You gotta go knock on some doors or something.
yeah, that's it.
Jessica actually has a bachelor or a master's in school counseling, and before we moved out here, she worked at the high school and elementary schools, and she loved it. She's loved teaching, and in that environment. And I don't know. I love teaching adults and instructors. So is that like when you say teaching English, you're like, do you look at it like that overseas? The age is
Yeah, I mean, sort of. Like it depends on the job, right? Because there's some English teaching jobs that are going to be like at schools, so they'll be at like elementary schools or middle schools or high schools or whatever like sort of the equivalent is. And then there's English teaching jobs like here in Korea. They have a lot of companies that do like English teaching just for like the locals, like a night school kind of thing, and so you can do that as well. I'm looking towards doing it more at like an elementary or middle school level, because I think I would enjoy that. But at the end of the day, whatever gets my foot in the door.
that's cool.
Yeah.
I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. So
Awesome. So, Sergeant Puma, how did you become the innovation guy? I guess how can you explain why Chief Oliver would say, "Hey, you got to talk to Sergeant Puma"? Like, what sort of developments or things have you worked on?
Yeah, I mean, when it's you don't really know, right? Like I don't, I mean, I'm happy that like Chief Oliver does that, but like as the person, like you never really you never really think of yourself in that way, if that makes sense. But I think a lot of it has to do with not me, right? It has to do with empowering those folks below me, that feel, and that way they feel empowered to come up with ideas. And really, it's just about pushing those processes forward. And yeah, I mean, there are times when I come up with ideas and things that I want to like change or innovate. But for every idea I had, there was an airman sitting next to me who had another idea or a better idea. And I think it's just a matter of like pushing those ideas forward and not killing them at the lower level. And then, when, we had, obviously Article 6 and TJAG visits, and, Chief Oliver was a USAFE Command Paralegal Manager while I was the lost at Mildenhall. And I think he saw a lot of the things that we were doing with the way that we, all the way from like, different programs that we had going on to the makeup of our office, so, and I think I might even talk to you about this, because we created the, like the legal operations section at Mildenhall for a little while. And that was where basically we didn't have a military justice or a general law. We went away from that. And we basically had all the paralegals in one spot, and which allowed them to work together. We had like manning crunch, and I was looking for ways to help everybody kind of work together better and to get the stuff flowing through the office, right? Because you'll have somebody in you hear this complaint all the time. You have somebody in general law and they're not as busy as the guys doing justice. And so the general law paralegal leaves at, 4:30 every day, and the justice guys are staying until, 5:30 or 6. And it's like, oh, it's not fair. And then it builds this animosity. And also, and so basically what we did is we looked at everything and we came up with that plan. And so that's like one of them, sort of like office based. And then we did other things like, we came up with a buzzer system for the front desk because a lot of it comes to, I guess a lot of the innovation comes from issues or problems, right? You look at this problem and you go, how can we fix this problem, right? I never took someone, if somebody said, hey, we can't do this, like I didn't like to hear that word, right? You can't. And you hear that a lot with things. And I'm very interested to hear about the EROTs because I've heard can't a lot in regards to EROTs. But it's, but to me, a lot of it is it's just moving processes forward and empowering your folks, right? And I think, being able to do that, you can come up with, 20 innovations, 20 changes, 20 ideas within a year or more, in ways that you can improve processes little by little. But I think, and we might get into this more later, but I think one of the biggest issues that I have, overall with the JAG Corps is that we don't have a balance across the force. And what I mean by that is, you and your office may come up with an idea that works really well, right? But somebody might be at OSON working super hard on something and can't figure out how to fix it. And they have no idea that you're doing this idea that's great. And so that's where the balance gets off. And then also, if you go to like a maintenance, right, they have TOs that tell them how to fix a plane, right? Why is it then that when we go to a different legal office, it's like you're learning the job every time you PCS, right? Everybody has like a unique way of doing military justice and general law claims, and it shouldn't be like that, right? It should be balanced across the board. So if you PCS somewhere and you go somewhere else, you should be able to fill in no matter where it is, right? But anyway, back to the original, which is, I think it's all about empowerment, right? Empowering people. Really, it's not about the innovation at the end of the day. It's about listening, hearing what people have to say, and actually like trying things and failing, right? Because most of it's failing. I'll be honest. For every 10 ideas that someone has, 9 of those may not work. But you got to try, right? You got to try. So so that's kind of my thoughts on that question there. Hope I didn't ramble too much.
No, that was really good because now it kind of gets us into thinking of, and senior peers, you can jump in this one as well if you have some experience back from being a loss and an AF paralegal manager. But how do we create an environment where people feel comfortable to start developing ideas, right? Like how do we? Because our career field is very checklist oriented, right? Like it's for the most part. Although in the courtroom it may not be black and white, but the process is very much black and white. But how do we create an environment where we can potentially break out of that to develop better ideas?
It starts with communication, right? So he's not me.
Anybody's calling. Hey.
Where's Waldo? Where's the ringtone?
You gotta answer that. Is that your mom again?
Yeah.
This one's my wife this time. Hang on.
Oh yeah, you better answer that.
Yeah, you gotta answer that.
She's answer in Japan. It. Hang on. See, I always have this dilemma. I'll just text.
It's funny that what you were talking about, Sergeant Puma, that's kind of my thought on innovation is having the flexibility to adapt to whatever issues present themselves and being open to ideas from wherever they may come from. That's kind of how I look at it too. I'm rarely ever the smartest guy probably never the smartest guy in the room, right? But I know how to listen most times. I think it fails more at home. But at work, I know how to listen really well, right? And so, um, people bring ideas, and going back to what you were saying, um, Sergeant Perez, it starts with communication and just being open. And instead of starting with can't do it, right? Like with EROTs, taking ideas and at least running them the ground and seeing what we can't do, what our boundaries are, and what works and what doesn't work. Is because a lot of times you'll find, like you said, 9 out of 10 ideas don't work, but sometimes that 10th idea, the 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 real nexus of it can be traced back to one of the other ideas that didn't work. It just evolved. Um, but I think that's how you get to innovation. We are checklist oriented. That's for a reason, right? Because we're dealing with real people's lives. We want to get things right. We don't want things getting overturned in court. On So for JAJ, we try to be in the middle because we were with the prosecution and the defense. So we try not to favor one or the other. So we want to see it right on both sides. So you have the checklist, but you also don't want to stifle innovation, a different way of looking at things and tackling different issues. That's my thought on that.
Great. Well, since you bring up EROTs, let's go there right now. What's going on?
I'm ready to hear this.
So EROTs are actually very near and dear to TJAG's heart. When I first got to JAJ, I think probably within the first 3 months, he paid a visit to Afloa, and being the manager, I went with then it was Colonel Cordova, and went with TJAG and Chief Oliver and General Plummer and visit the various divisions that we have, right? And so he went to JHAM, and that's what he wanted to talk about. EROTs. What are we doing about it? How are we getting there? And so we're working that. It's very early. We are actually working with some bases. We're working with USAPA for one. On what does that look like? What is an EROT? Is an electronic record of trial just a scan? If you look at the definition, it's a digital scan. It's a digital copy. So does that work? So if we do digital scans, does that work at CAP or at AFCA as an original? Maybe, maybe not. So then we have to carry original copies or the original documents, right? But what if we do it electronically? We build a data system where everything kind of starts there, and there's different gateways or different access levels. So like the trial counsel can access all the records to a certain point, and then when it gets to AFCA, they can't access anymore. And then AFCA adds their records after that, and so on. And then that way, the whole ROT is created electronically, and that's a true electronic ROT, and it's the true originals. There's some things you have to work out, though, right? So you have, different kinds of evidentiary issues. Not all evidence can be print out child pornography, things like that. We can't just have that on a server. So there's different things like that we have to work out, and things of that nature that we're looking at. But that's just the electronic part of it. We're going as far as actually blocking a digital version of the record of trials and trying to figure out how that works and what the time sink into that is. Is it faster? Is it slower? Is it more challenging? I know Miss Steele did one of those, and she found it to be a little more challenging to go through it digitally. You have to open it up, close it, open it up, close it, compare it to right now original record trial, make sure everything matches. So we're running it ground. It's very early. We have an idea that we presented to TJAG regarding a program, but it's early in its infancy. I'm hesitant to say a whole lot about that part because I don't want to lock anyone into. I don't want someone to be like, Sergeant Pierce said TJAG says, so I don't want that coming back on me, right? But we are working it. and looking at those things among other things. And that's at JHM looking at that. I know before I came to JJ, when I thought JHM, I thought records of trial report cards. That's what I think when I think JHM. And I get there, and they're actually where Air Force policies comes from as far as the JAG Corps. They're doing a lot of the work on the sexual assault things, the side of the Sexual Assault Investigation Task Force and things like that. Doing EROTs, digital NJPs, and things like that, looking at all these different issues. And so it's really interesting to be part of those conversations and try to be that enlisted voice in there and kind of press, I know you have this great idea for paralegals to do, major, colonel, so-and-so, but like this is how we would actually do it. Maybe this works or maybe this doesn't. What if we tweak it this way or that way? And so it's a good time. EROTs are coming. The other part you're trying to do, so we're talking innovation, you also got to stay grounded in reality, right? So how expensive is it going to be? How much money do we think we could get funded for something like that? Often Florida cited as a state that does electronic ROTs, but they start off with a program that was supposed to be a couple $1 million, and it went millions and millions and millions over budget. So in the military, we can't do that, and so we have to compete with other Air Force priorities to get funding for things like that, or for things like defense case management system, right? Something that I've been hearing about, it feels like, since I was a staff sergeant, right? It goes
15 years ago.
And so when you're developing a program, in my mind, part of the innovation is grounding some reality and saying, okay, if we really want to get this off the ground, we have to make it feasible financially and beneficial to everybody.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so if I can chime in real quick, I think, I agree with everything you said. I think, but I think for the folks that are, lower, right, at lower levels, to them, I think it doesn't make sense. And I say that in the nicest way possible, right? Like, I think we don't do a good enough job of explaining the strategic or from the operational level, like, the guy who's building the ROT, to the strategic level of like, here's why, right? Here's all the steps that have to happen. And so when you're coming up with the idea for the EROT, like, cool, amazing, but like, here's kind of like how the process is going to take place, which will kind of allow them to re-engage. So, I know, and I'll do a shout out to Sergeant Jose Sanchez, right? He was working at USAFA. And I know he gets hot about it sometimes. We were working this idea actually at Milton Hall long ago, because we were trying to create, the checklist. Basically as you do the checklist, you load the docs, and then it'll compress it, and then it's like all together, right? It gets compressed. But the problem was, like, the Air Force didn't allow that in Adobe, so like it was an authorized extension, but the Air Force only has like this much of Adobe, and so it just never really worked out. But I know he's been taking that and working with that. But I think but part of that is I think a lot of times we don't look from within, right? So we have people who can code, who can create programs, and who can do it within a couple months. But yet we continue to go hire these companies to create these programs, right? If we wanted to, I'm sure we could find a paralegal who can code and who could create something, that would allow those sorts of things. But the matter is trying to find those folks and things like that. And I believe there is something that's going to be coming in that regards, but I won't speak too much on that either, because I'm not trying to speak for anybody. But I agree with you. I think, there's a lot more than I think a lot of people know and how these things go. But I think, and I think part of the problem is getting those leaders in the office, like like me, like you, like losses, to be able to talk to the strategic level of those offices like JJ and things like that. And I think that's why this Facebook page is really good, because it can kind of like bridge that gap so people can get on there and talk about those specific or specialized jobs. Because like you said, I honestly don't, outside of ROTS, like, I don't know, I wouldn't, years ago, like, I don't know what JJ does. They send me a report card, right? That's what they do. They look at ROTS all day, right? But I know there's more than that. And I know now, right, like being a master sergeant, being a loss, like I know they do more than that. But when you look at those lower level airmen, like that's what they think, right? So.
Right. I mean, I can remember too, like when we talk about EROTs, I'm like, scan the documents in, create one file, done, call it good. So and then I, as you like you said, you promote up and then you move up to higher organizations and things like that. You realize like, okay, so we have to sell this to the stakeholders, right? APCA and CAP and JJG and JJA, JJD, and anyone else that might have a dog in the fight kind of thing. And so it makes it a little more complicated. So we're more at the concept phase, but talking about innovation and where it comes from. So we've gotten a lot of traction on digital NJP, and that wasn't top-down driven exclusively. There was some bottom push as well, where I'm gonna be careful about how I say this, where different match comps have presented ideas of how to do digital NJPs, right? And so when you're talking about, you kind of alluded to it earlier, we want to avoid a bunch of different county options, because that's how you end up PCSing from Hill Air Force Base to Langley Air Force Base, changing match comms, and then you're doing the different versions of the same job. So you're having to relearn. So we want to try to avoid county options, but I'll take innovation from wherever, and then try my best to sell the good ideas and try to get them polished up the best that we can, and then present them to TJAG, and hopefully they become a JAG Corps policy, right? And then we're all using them. And that's what we're doing with digital NJPs. We work with ATC, AFDW. I took some calls from a couple other match comms and trying to develop this. And the draft product we have now, I think, is awesome. Completely digital. It just hasn't been blessed all the way up yet. And then we had to work with AFIs and updating those things as well if we're going to release it. But a lot of that was driven, from outside agencies, not from within AFLO or JJ. So I know I talked about it, but it's helpful when the demand is strong to kind of get things going. And sometimes you take an unfortunate situation like COVID, right? Working from home, and it drives necessity. You have innovation on necessity now. You want to try to limit some of that personal interaction. Sure, the shirt and or the commander might interact with the queues, right, during the NJP process, but if we can limit that a little bit, that's a win. So innovation comes from anywhere, but I'm with you though. I'm not so far removed where I can't remember. I can't remember, like, well, what do you mean you can't just do it? Like,
right. Yeah.
All right, so so jumping into the discussion. So there's a couple of things that I took out from when you were explaining the EROTs, and then when you also jumped in, Sergeant Puma, about the process in which we go about making things happen, whether it's EROTs or whatever other innovation, right? We can have some programmers, and a lot of people can code things nowadays, but we have these Spark hubs too, like at different bases, and we have AFWorks, which is pairing up the Air Force community with the civilian community. And sometimes we can provide funding that can come from the unit to try to get someone to help us out with those type of programs. But then again, right? I mean, we don't want to overcomplicate things and have a lot of different people involved. But that's a different avenue for trying to push. If it's a money thing, to push in certain ideas and creating those ideas as well. Uh, so that would be one avenue. But then the EROTs right now. So we're talking about EROTs, and there's a potential path towards the future. Um, However, the discussion it's like I've been hearing the EROTs discussion probably since 2010, 2011, 2012. I actually sent a submission back in 2016 through the Urban Powered by Innovation program. It was a 97-page submission as to why we should do EROTs, right? It was like a legal review type thing with an MFR, and then it was also referencing, AFIs that were, outdated, that were still published in the 90s, right? That we were still, I'm talking about. But also the MCM in 2012, when it updated saying that it allowed for electronic records of trial, and this is 2012, so we're talking about now 8 years since the MCM allowed for that. So I guess where I'm trying to get at, just my question is there something more immediate that allows us to just do the block the ROTs through a PDF? So are legal offices allowed to do that currently? Like, can we?
I would say if you're interested in doing it, you can either reach out to me directly. I'm as open as they come. I respond to every email I get and every phone call, and I call back and things like that. Or you can reach out to JJM, maybe talk to Miss Steele and see, because we don't want it to turn into a free-for-all where it's hard to, because if it becomes unwieldy, it stymies progress too, right? So there has to be some manner of control. So we don't need, PDS from every location of the Air Force coming in various states of, various versions of what each installation thinks is their version or the right version. Right? Like it becomes unwieldy, it becomes hard to manage. So there has to be some sense of everybody rowing in the same direction. So I would offer, the installation has ideas. If a paralegal at whatever level has an idea, reach out and offer it, and we'll take a look at it. Because it is very conceptual. Right now we're trying to figure out exactly what it's going to look like in the future. So that's what I would say.
So at the base level, there's nothing that prevents you from having your copies of the ROT be electronic. In fact, if you go into AFRAMS and you look at the records disposition schedule, it actually says to keep it electronic in your records. So, at the base level, right, like once you send that original and the copies off to everybody, your office copy doesn't have to take up 100 file cabinets in your office. You can scan those in. Like that's completely authorized under the records disposition schedule. You'd have to be careful if you had any originals. Obviously, you can't do that with a few of our documents in the office. But really, I think you go and, whenever I traveled JI and I would see these like giant file plans with like thousands of files and all these file cabinets taking up offices. And I'm like, really, there's only a couple things that you have to keep original in a legal office file plan. The rest of it can be scanned in. And ROTS is one of those things that can be scanned in. And it might be a good way to get your airmen to come up with ways of scanning it in and sending those ideas, because they may come up with like, a multi-duplex kind of like cool system, and they can push that along with Sergeant Pierce, which will help in the future as they come online with EROTs. So, so I would always, suggest scanning those ROTs in because it just takes up so much space in your office.
I think the only add I would say in there is if you're going to do that, just kind of from a superintendent point of view, reach out to whoever JAI is at the time. Right now, it's Chief Reed and whoever, who's going to be in the future. And just as far as you don't want inspections running your the way you think and all that, but that's one of those big enough inspectable items where I'm like, I just want the more fuzzy, as far as that goes. Maybe that's just the cautious person in me. So
I'm not cautious. I say just do those things. Ask for forgiveness later. No, he's right. You should be asking. But if your SJ is cool with it, well.
And there are really innovative SJs. I know I saw it coming out of 12th Air Force, doing different kinds of things. And sometimes they would get ahead of us and we're like, hey, can you stop that for a little bit and let's look at this? But there are definitely some innovative SJs out there.
All right, so I'll leave the EROT topic alone for now, but talk to me about this NJP, electronic NJPs, because we just received recently the new form, right? Like I think this came out last week, 2 weeks ago, maybe. Was it sooner than that?
The days are all going together right now.
I know. I can't keep up with
it. I think it was a month ago.
I don't know, it's last year. But I know, so that is essentially allowing for the signatures to happen electronically. Now is that the vision? Is there more that's coming down with electronic NJPs?
So I think that's the vision, not having it up right now. The last version I saw, and honestly, so this is where you catch me a little bit. I haven't pulled up the one that you're able to pull up now. That's been pushed out to the field. The last version I saw, it actually would allow it to have pop-ups for the commander at every, like when they would sign, it would pop up and give them instructions on what to do, when things should be done, the timeline, things like that, things to consider. Go further down and it would give a pop-up like, when they get to punishment, if they want to line something out, it would tell them how to do it electronically without physically doing things like that. So those are some of the ideas we were toying with. So being upfront without having the current version you have in front of you, I don't know how that marries up to the last version that I chopped on. But those were some of the things we were playing with. Just getting totally away from the paper instructions. Everything you needed to know and do was just on there and it pop up, almost like aging myself, like VH1 pop-ups back in the day, right? Little, they just give you some information. You consider this. Are you sure you want to do this? And things of that nature. So, and that version was actually created by one of the attorneys in JJM. And then he pushed it around. I was one of the people that chopped on it and tried to make sure that it looked as good as it could.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a good idea for sure.
Hey, so I can just make a note real quick about something you said earlier about the spark tank. So I don't want to speak too much on it, but there is something coming similar to that for the JAG core. So it's still in the process of being approved, right? And there's a couple folks working on that program, so that folks like you, right? Because you said, you submitted this idea to the Air Force, right? You submitted this 96-page idea, right, on how to do EROTs, and you probably hit dead space, right, or got a response back like that said, thanks, but keep trying later, right? Like something like that. So, so the process. Yeah. So Sergeant Pierce was like, what is this? Shred this thing.
So bottom line up front.
That's right. But there is, so folks are working on something like that for the JAG Corps, so that those ideas that these like paralegals have, if they don't have like a specific lane, or you know what, there's some, you know, offices, maybe an SJA or a loss doesn't want to push ideas, and they'll have sort of like another way to do that, and then hopefully that'll get the JAG Corps some of those innovation funds too, right? Which is what really, you know, really positive for that, because the Air Force, you know, the maintenance and those career fields take a lot of that money, and we don't see it. And so, so it'd be good for us to do that. So that's something that is in the works. Like I said, I don't want to speak too much on it because I don't want to get ahead of anybody. You know, but it is hopefully coming. You know, here within the next, you know, 6 months or so. You know, things take time at the strategic level. You know, more time than I like sometimes, but definitely things are gonna happen. You know, for in that realm, in the innovation realm, specifically with the JAG Corps, I would say within the next 6 months or so. So definitely I would keep an eye out for that, because I think it'll be good, right, for folks like you who submitted something and hit dead space. You'll actually get some form of action on that. While not every idea is going to be implemented, you know, you'll at least get some real strategic response as to why, right?
And for the record, speaking out of the microphone, I didn't get to JAJ till August 2019. His submission was 2016.
Oh, the disclaimer comes out. Well, you can find that on roster, right? You can. Well, when did he get there? Denying all these ideas.
I think some of the code talk too, though, we're using highlight some of the tricky part of innovation when it gets to a certain level strategically, right? You're like, I don't want to speak out of turn and say too much and get ahead of things, and so I feel that pressure too a little bit with some of this stuff. Like, you know, what can I say?
That's right.
Like kind of thing, right?
And they expect this. Like, when is that coming out? Well, that fell through like 3 years ago. Like, that's not a thing. That's not a thing anymore.
I still talk about that.
All right, so Sergeant Puma, talk to me about so the great idea for the Air Force Paralegal COVID-19 training page. So how did that come about? What is
Sure.
you know, I mean, we've seen it in action, and it's just an excellent product. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so to be honest with you, you know, like all great ideas, you're sitting at home on the toilet. No, I'm just kidding. You know, I was, you know, one night, you know, we had been, you know, because Korea got hit with COVID, you know, much earlier than the U.S., right? And we had just gone into sort of a, you know, a base-wide shutdown. You know, folks were starting to do split shifts. You know, in our office at the NAF, it was really only two of us, you know, who were coming in. Everybody else was working from home. You know, and I was thinking of ways that, you know, within my NAF, because, you know, training, you know, as a NAF paralegal manager, training is sort of one of your key tenets, right? And so I was thinking for a way that our paralegals could continue to get their, you know, paralegal training done. And so, you know, so I was like, man, you know, and I saw the Air Force Quarantine University Facebook page, but that was really, and it's a great page, but, you know, 99.9% of it is like resiliency, right? It's not really training as much as it is like, you know, professional development. And I said, you know, we really need something where we can do stuff from home. And we have KM, and I won't give my personal opinion on KM, but we have KM, and KM's great for certain things. But, you know, but I think it misses the connection piece, right, where we feel connected together, giving folks a voice. And so, you know, so I thought, well, you know what, we could do what the Air Force Quarantine University does. We could create a Facebook page. Everybody can have access to that. We can record trainings to that. They can watch it whenever they want to. We can put it on YouTube for those folks that don't have Facebook, right? And so, you know, so I messaged Sergeant Crowell, and I was like, hey, what do you think about this? Here's what I'm thinking. And he's like, yeah, he's like, do it. Yeah, let's do it. So we did it. And it kind of just exploded from there. You know, it showed that there was a need, I think, you know, and a want by a lot of folks to get this, and not all training, but also like interaction with our senior leaders, right? Because you see it all over now too, right? Part of that was, over here we have there's an army base over called at Camp Humphreys, and there the Eighth Army commander does a Facebook Live, and they were doing it all the time, like once or twice a week, and they were getting like 20,000 views, right? So it was folks all over the world, including the folks there stationed there, and so I think there were a lot of people, or at least one of the things that came out of COVID was people wanting to be more connected with their leaders, and being able to see them and talk to them, and being a little more open with things, which kind of goes back to the airman who doesn't really understand what JJJ does or JJM does, and so but they want to know, right? Like we all want to know, and so I think this gives them the ability to see that stuff, and then also get some paralegal training and get their CLE knocked out, because obviously we're not going to all stay in quarantine type styles forever, hopefully, crossing the fingers. And so I think it's a good way to do that. But that's kind of the nexus of where it all came from, and kind of where it stands right now. And then obviously we're waiting on the new CFETP to drop, because it's getting ready to drop. It's getting ready to drop. I feel like I keep saying that every week, but it's getting ready to drop at some point. And then once it does, hopefully we're going to get some more actual paralegal training out there. It's a little hard to do it right now because what we don't want is to have somebody train on something that's going to be old in a week. And so that's a lot of reasons why that stuff hasn't been posted to KM either, because we don't want to put stuff out there that's dead already, and so we want to put out stuff that's current and relevant. And so that's why we're waiting for that new CFETP to drop. And we have somebody waiting in the wings to do a training on the new CFETP as soon as it hits the ground. So, but yeah, anyway, but that's kind of the nexus, and kind of where it's at and why I think it's good. So
I'm a huge fan, and that was just, to me, an amazing idea. I think it was during the weekend. I had just recently woken up, and one of the paralegals, we have a paralegal chat in our office, and she sent the link to I'm like, what is this? What is this? Our first training, COVID-19 paralegal training. Like, what is? And then when I see it, it's like Sergeant Puma. I'm like, of course it's Sergeant Puma. Because I had already talked to you, and you had already, and Chief Oliver had already mentioned you. So, but it has highlighted, like the ability and the innovation within our field and what our airmen are capable of doing. Like, I've seen some impressive things in that training. I've seen a lot of information, people that are excellent presenters, people that handle technology really well. It has just sparked, like creativity from other areas as well. So that was kind of like the main thing to hit. And then after that, it's like, okay, well, if this is possible, then anything is possible. And that's really how this podcast came about as well. It's just, that was an avenue to create that. And we want to continue to promote, connection in our field. And I felt like this is a way that we could, bring us together, because otherwise we wouldn't be having this discussion potentially. I mean, maybe we could, maybe we couldn't, but then we could have it. It would be private, but here, it can be shared with everyone that listens as well. So really, you did something definitely absolutely great with that. And I know, you hesitate to take the credit for that, because obviously a lot of other people make it happen. But.
Did you expect it to take off as fast as it did?
No. I mean, like I said originally, I thought it was going to be, because the original idea was just for Osan Kunsan, right, to be able to share training. Never did I think in my wildest dreams that it would have taken off like it did, and I think, like I said, I think it was a mix of people being in quarantine, right, and you're at home, and wanting that connectedness, and then I think, but yeah, I never would have thought it would have taken off like that, but I think it taught us all a good lesson on kind of like how to connect better, JAG Corps wide. And so I think that, hopefully, pushes the folks who are in charge of KM to see, kind of like gives them thoughts on how to improve that system as well. Because really, it's about the younger folks and getting the younger folks out there, and getting them information more than it is for like me or you.
Right, but I remember I got invited to the page by Chief Thomas, and I saw him like, "Whoa, what the heck's this about? COVID paralegal page? What's this thing?" It was more of just a curiosity, right? And so
Mm,
I think that was like right around the same time you posted your first video. I was like, "Huh, that seems pretty cool." And then next thing I know, everybody's on.
mm,
So
yeah.
that's awesome.
So this has definitely been a great discussion, and I just have maybe one last thought to kind of see what you guys think. Where are we gonna be in the next? Where do you think we could be in the next 5 to maybe 10 years in the Jack Court? Like, what are the possibilities?
Well, who thought we'd be where we are now,
Well,
right? Like 6 months ago, uh, I just the first week of March, I flew to Canada Air Force Base to do a JAI inspection. No mask, no nothing, no cares in the world as far as that goes. End of March, working from home, or a lot of us are working from home, wearing masks and things like that. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say where we'll be, but I think you know uh, what the Air Force and what people show is our ability to adapt, to innovate, and to flex the way we live our lives to do and accomplish where we think we need to accomplish. Um, 5 to 10 years, I think we'll definitely have pull up and digital NJP. I think we'll probably see more digital things. That's not because we're talking about this; is me projecting out and things like that. I think there's a real possibility we might see EROTs. I do kind of jokingly think we'll still be talking about DCMS. I, I kid. I hope not, but we'll see, right? Um, I think it'll be interesting, like how Space Force going to impact the JAG Corps. What's that going to look like as that organization matures and things like that? What's the pool going to be like? There's the possibilities are endless. Look, like at Flow, we're going through a big alignment right now. We're going to 3 directorates. Um, you know, almost everything justice is moving to JAJ now. So like SPP community, SPCs, all of that stuff's going to JAJ and become this big giant directorate. Like, so I mean, who knows? Like 5, 10 years from now, 10 years from now, they might be like, I like it the old way. And reverse course, it's hard to say.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know that anyone could say exactly where it's going to be 5 to 10 years from now. I mean, I hope um, the balance gets better across the JAG Corps in offices and things like that. And I think there's a lot of people who are pushing that. Now. And I think things hopefully will become more streamlined for everybody. Um, but I hope with that we don't lose some of that like skill, right? I always look at like claims as a because when we came in, like that was the thing, we did claims, right? And we all were very knowledgeable in how we did claims. And now if we have an airman who has to do a claim, he's getting trained by someone who never did a claim. So so that's something I think that I think that hinders us a little bit. And I hope that, as I think that's one of the things we need to look at as we're streamlining these processes is that we're not losing that thought, right? Like, I remember we had to do 10% of our claims by hand, right? And it's like, well, now we don't even do any. So, I think it's a good skill for us to have because there are times when you have to do claims. And so that's just an example. But I think, holistically, hopefully as we push things forward, things will become more streamlined. Our airmen are more knowledgeable of the strategic level because I think that's extremely important. I think had I known that stuff when I was younger, I'd be in a better position today. But it's really at the end of the day, it's hard to say where we'll be 5 to 10 years from now. We'll be scanning in our first rot in 2045. No, I have no idea, but but I think we're all moving in the right direction. It's just a matter of getting there.
I do think communication's a lot better now, and we do a lot better job pushing down information. At least I hope so. I remember when I retrained out of maintenance, and that we had a salve with the NAF. I was like, "What's a NAF? What's that? What's that?" So
maybe you guys know, but I haven't seen this yet. I haven't really seen a court since I got back into the career field from doing my PME instructor thing. But are attorneys using iPads in the courtroom or no?
Some are, some aren't.
Whatever they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
You see it in the classroom. Even when I was instructing, we had an instructor, Calvin Johnson, Sergeant Johnson. He liked using the iPad when he taught, where I liked paper. No.
Yeah, I definitely used the iPad when I taught ALS. I had to. No way I was still gonna do.
I can.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they are, but I think what would you have to wonder about, because we thought about doing EROT or not EROT. Geez, EROT's on my mind. We thought about doing iPads for everyone, including the members, right? So the members have little iPad stands in front of them, and as they're the evidence is getting introduced, they get to see it right there. The problem is, again, it's that balance, and it's the judges, right? Because the judges may not, you may get a judge who doesn't want to do it like that. You may get a judge who does want to do it like that. Because we had reusable notebooks, and we were using reusable notebooks for our members. And, there's a judge, we showed it to him in advance, very cool with it. We had another judge who came in and was like, no, what is this crazy finagled magic? We're not going to use this in our trials. So I think it's, just a thought with that stuff. And again, it goes back to that balance and that strategic level talks and bringing stuff up through, right? Which I think that new, program for the JAG Corps will hopefully bridge that gap a little bit for us. But anyway, I talk too much.
So it's funny because those things seem great in our minds whenever we think about them. Like, oh man, every member has an iPad, and you just give them the evidence or the exhibits through the iPad. But the moment it doesn't work or there's a technical difficulty, it just becomes awkward, right? And then you've lost all credibility because now everybody's waiting. Oh, this is not working.
Even as simple as something like creating a YouTube video, right? You want to use a YouTube video as part of your attention step as an instructor, right? I know at the JAG Corps, we're not under ATC, so we're not as limited as you are as an ALS instructor. But like when it freezes, just a YouTube video, like it's super awkward. You're like, some people throw them off their whole game. So
that's right. It's like, oh, what's going on?
What happened was.
Yeah, and then in the courtroom, I can't imagine, right? And depending on the judge, the judge, if they weren't on board with that to begin with, they'll probably be livid. It's like, what's going on? So legal office, are we going to have a legal office in Mars or at the moon maybe? Because you brought up Space Force, so is that a possibility? I don't know about 10 years, but...
That would be awesome, wouldn't it? Our first court-martial at Space Station, whatever.
That's right. Did you know Sergeant Major Spadero, Sergeant Puma? Did you ever meet him?
No.
He was the U.S. PACOM senior enlisted leader. He was a Marine, and he used to come to the schoolhouse all the time to ALS.
All right.
And he was like, yeah, we're going to be in the moon. You're going to be in the moon. You're going to be firing M4s in the moon, so get ready. We're going to be fighting in space. And I'm like, is this too serious? And he seemed like he was serious.
I remember in elementary school, they were telling us we were all going to be riding hoverboards and flying and driving hover cars and stuff like that. I remember that. I've seen that stuff yet, but
yeah.
But they weren't predicting these things. So
yeah, it's true.
That's right. No, this has been crazy innovation. But hey, thank you both for being on here, having this discussion today. This was really good. It's really informative, I think, and it's really fun. So
It's a good time.
Thanks for having us on. I appreciate it. Thanks for doing this. This is a great idea. I think folks will like it because they'll get to hear our voices. Well, they may not like that, but maybe they'll get some information.
Well, for me too, partly. I've heard so much about starting Puma, so this is the first time I actually interacted with you and things like that. So I thought that was kind of cool for me to finally put the face in the conversation, the reputation. So all good stuff. It's awesome. And hopefully, this drives conversation amongst our peers and pushes information out. Things like that, because you never know what's going to take off, whether it's a Facebook page or podcasts or whatever. You just don't know what's going to take hold until you try.
Right. Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, it's been real. Thank you. Sergeant Puma, have a great day. See your peers.
Yeah.
Have a good night. Put your 5 kids to sleep. One of them is in the Army, so he's good to go.